Everyone, and welcome. Today we're going to be detectives and dive into a really fascinating economic mystery. We're going to explore what truly makes a country's economy tick, and we're using Vietnam, one of the fastest growing economies on the planet, as our case study. All right, let's get into it.
We hear all the time about these huge, grand strategies and big government plans. But what if the real secret isn't in the headlines at all? What if it's kind of hidden in the little day-to-day details of just getting business done? Well, that's the big question we're looking at today.
And this is where our puzzle really starts. I mean, look, Vietnam has been this incredible global success story, right? Its GDP growth is through the roof, but when you pop the hood and look at the engine, a really key indicator, its productivity growth is actually slowing down. And for long-term healthy growth, that's a huge red flag. So what in the world is going on? To solve this mystery, we first have to understand our main clue, total factor productivity, or TFP. The easiest way to think about it is this. It's not about working harder or just buying more machines. TFP is all about working smarter. It's that kind of magic ingredient that comes from new ideas, new tech, and just being more efficient. And it is absolutely crucial for a healthy economy.
So if you're a researcher, where do you even start looking for clues? Well, a brand new study from 2024 points the finger at one prime suspect, something called institutional quality. Now, I know, it sounds a little academic, but stick with me, because it might just be the key that unlocks this whole thing.
The Nobel Prize winner Douglas North put it perfectly. He said, institutions are just the rules of the game. That's it. They're all the official rules and even the unofficial ones that shape how businesses run, how people deal with each other, basically the invisible wiring of an economy. So in Vietnam, researchers measure these rules of the game across 10 different areas. You can think of these as the 10 main suspects in our investigation. It includes things like, how easy is it to start a business? How transparent are things? How much time do you waste on paperwork? What are the labor policies like? And yeah, even the level of informal charges, which is a nice way of saying corruption.
And the first big clue from the investigation is in, and it's a really clear one. Yep, having better rules of the game absolutely positively leads to firms being more productive. A better business environment helps companies work smarter. No big surprise there, but it's good to confirm. And this isn't just some vague feeling. They actually put a number on it. The study found that for every single 1-point improvement in that overall institutional quality score, a company's productivity, its TFP, goes up by 0.027. It's a direct, measurable link.
Okay, but here's the real multi-billion-dollar question, right? A government can't fix all 10 of these things at once. It has limited time, limited money, limited people. So where should they focus? Which one of these 10 rules gives you the most bang for your buck when it comes to boosting productivity?
And the study's answer is surprisingly practical. The single biggest, most impactful factor isn't some huge complex theory. It's time cost. We're talking about the literal amount of time that businesses waste dealing with bureaucracy. Government inspections, endless paperwork, just waiting around for approvals. Cutting that red tape, that has the biggest effect.
And right behind that, at number 2, is labor policy. Now, this is all about the quality of the workforce. How easy is it for a company to find people with the right skills? How good are the local schools and training programs? It makes sense, right? A more skilled workforce is going to be a more productive workforce.
But here's where things get really interesting. Take a look at this contrast. The study found that while super practical stuff like cutting red tape and improving the labor market were huge, some of the things we hear about all the time had no statistically significant impact. And surprisingly, this included efforts to reduce those informal charges, corruption. Now, that's not to say fighting corruption isn't important, but the data here shows those efforts didn't directly translate into making firms more productive. Fascinating. All right, so we know that focusing on cutting bureaucracy and building a better workforce really helps. But our investigation uncovered one more twist. Do these improvements help all companies in the same way? And here is the plot twist. When you break it down by who actually owns the company, this really amazing picture emerges. So cutting red tape and improving labor policies, it gives a huge productivity boost to local private companies. For foreign firms, there's a small positive effect, but the evidence is a little weak. But get this, for state-owned companies, the study found no significant impact at all. They just don't seem to get the same productivity juice from these improvements. So after all that detective work, what's the big takeaway here? Well, let's call it small hinges, big doors.
The message for policymakers is incredibly clear.
If you want to boost your economy's productivity, the path is pretty straightforward. Step 1. Get obsessed with streamlining your procedures and cutting all that bureaucratic red tape. Step 2. Invest seriously in education and job training to build a world-class workforce.
And that leaves us with one last really powerful thought to chew on. This whole investigation was about Vietnam, but you have to believe the lesson is universal. If fixing something that seems as small as paperwork and training can unlock so much economic potential, just imagine how much growth is just sitting there, locked away, waiting to be unleashed in other economies all around the world.